All right, today we're tearing into a Yamaha Badger 80. This is a 1985 model. There is also the Moto 480 that's going to have a similar motor to this. A couple different years of the Badgers and the Moto 4s that'll fit this. Tearing this motor down, I've got a customer that wants this head. I have got the cylinder here that I believe is in good... Nope, cancel that. It's not. It's seized up. Got your magneto. Stator flywheel assembly over here we're going to take apart. This is electric start, so quite sophisticated for 1985. We've got your clutch components over here. So first we're going to tear into the top end. I've showed you how to do a valve adjustment on this. Make sure you check that video on my channel. We've got an engine number here. This one is a 55X-013086 is the engine number off of this. And I've done several other videos on the Yamaha Badger, so make sure you check those out. Who doesn't love a good Badger? So we're going to take the head right off of this thing and make sure this motor here never runs again. First thing we're going to do, we've got 10mm bolts on the top here. That's actually not the first thing you're going to do. First thing you're going to do is mess with your cam chain tensioner here. If you go ahead and pull these off and pull our 8mm off on the side of the cylinder head here, your cam chain is going to be bound up in there. It's going to be holding us up. Could potentially cause some damage here. So impact drivers, I've used it countless times. You guys have seen it. Pull these two Phillips screws off of here. We'll go ahead and remove those at this time. And then this little cover here can be a little bit of a bear because it's got a seal, and you can see that seal there. This genius here also did some liquid gasket sealant, so made us for twice the work there. We're able to pull that off of there. We've got our intake valve here. We've got our exhaust valve underneath up here. And you can see the cam chain. And I'll give you a close-up here and a little bit of what this looks like. But we've got our cam chain lockdown screw here. We've got our adjuster cam as well as our spring down here. So pull this off. This is going to be a 17mm cap here. And as soon as you pull that off, you're going to feel a little bit of pressure there from that spring. So we can go ahead and remove that at this time. This is all part of the cam chain tensioner process. We've got a 10mm nut here. This is a lock nut. This, and then you've got actually a Phillips screw that'll run in and out here to lock our cam chain. I would call this like a cam or a cylinder that runs up and down here. Now this spring and this cap here is going to be putting constant pressure on the guide that sits down in here, and that actually puts the tension on the actual cam chain. So this screw just locks it in so that it does not go, does not come out too far, does not go in too far. So that locks it in there. So what you'll have to do is grab a screwdriver, loosen this up here, and then you're able to either stick your finger or a pair of pliers in there and pull this out of there. Don't use your standard pliers. That's going to be fairly difficult. We're going to use what they call a reverse plier here. Stick it in there. You can just take and work this piece out. Now, if you're having a hard time getting this piece out, make sure you take and unscrew that a little bit farther, as it can get bound up in there as you pull this out. So you can see what is inside of there, and then it's got a kind of a cup in there that'll hold your guide, and I'll show you that when we get down in there farther. But I'm going to set that aside for now until we get down in there farther. You can actually leave that in. At this point, go ahead and remove these. These will all have a washer that'll go with them. When we're going back together, which this old Badger here is not going to go back together, but when we're going back together, you want to make sure that those are torqued down. There's also two 8mm bolts on the side of the cylinder head here. One on the bottom, but closer to your exhaust side. One on the side here, closer to your cam chain sprocket side. Those 8mm got to come all the way out. Set that aside there. Then we're going to grab a 17mm. We're going to go ahead and remove this sprocket here. Remove that bolt there. It also has a washer, so make sure that doesn't drop down into your cylinder there and down into your crankcase. Set that aside. Now you can just either take your finger or a pick and pull that sprocket off. Sometimes there's a little bit of pressure there. If your cam chain hasn't completely released yet, it will once you take the pressure off of it. So pull that cam chain sprocket out of there. What I normally do is take my pick, then hold it in and just kind of drag that chain all the way off. There's your sprocket there. There's a groove right in this sprocket here that's going to line up with the groove on your camshaft. So make sure that's going the proper direction. Make sure that tab sticks into the cam. Now, as soon as we get that out, we are ready to pull this cylinder head. If you have not pulled this off before, sometimes it takes a little bit of tapping on the actual cylinder head there. You want to make sure you're using a rubber or a plastic mallet there to remove that so you're not damaging any of these areas here. This is an aluminum head, breaks very, very easily. Also, keep track of these washers. You're going to need them later. So pull that head off of here, and there's your cylinder head. There's your intake valve here. Here's your exhaust valve, obviously your spark plug running through there. We have got your camshaft that's right here. We can take and pull that out if we need. To pull your rockers out, obviously take these caps off of here, run a bolt down into these ports here. You can take and pull those shafts out at that point, and then your rockers will just fall right out of there. That's how you remove those rockers. Then you're able to pull those valves and remove those. So I'm going to set this head aside here. We're going to continue on with this dismantle here. We've got a head gasket here, and this gasket here is, I believe, a 3-piece set. Yeah, it's got 3 pieces here. If you're ordering one aftermarket or stock, it'll come like that. So it's not like you have to put 3 of these together. This is the way that it comes. That's the dimension that it needs to be. So we've got a dowel pin here that we need to keep with our cylinder. So I'm going to slide that back on there. Obviously, throw these gaskets away. You're not going to reuse something like that. We've got our guide here. I told you I'd show you what that looked like. So this guide sits right down into that cam is what I'm going to call this. And but it's not like your cam shaft. It's just a cam cylinder, cam piece, coupler. I don't know what they're going to call it on the microfiche, but what that does is when that spring puts pressure down on here, it'll actually kind of put pressure on that guide there, putting pressure on the chain. So that is how that cam chain works there in that tensioner. Now we're able to pull this other guide out, inspect these. Going back together, you want to make sure that this bottom piece here slides down into the correct area, and I'll show you that when we get into the magneto assembly here. You're going to be able to see that groove where that sits. Also, make sure that that sits properly onto the cylinder there. Set that aside. Now, that's as far as we're going to be able to go with our cam chain for now. Now what you're going to do is just take this cylinder, and you can either pop it with a plastic mallet or a rubber mallet, and then you just take and pull it up. And it seems to be sticking about right here. I'm going to guess that's because we're sticking on our piston. I told you it was seized up. I think I told you that at the beginning of the video. Definitely is. This piston is not moving. So I'm actually going to grab a rubber mallet here, tap it back down, see if I can get that piston to break free. Doesn't look like it's going to be too terrible to get apart once we get this piston unseized. And it's more rusted than anything. Once we get that cylinder head off of there, we can take and remove our cylinder. Sometimes that takes a plastic mallet. Tap on it there, you can just tap and that'll start coming up there. Now I'm a little bit afraid because of that piston being seized in there that we're going to have a hard time pulling this cylinder off of here. We'll just kind of work it like that. We sprayed some penetrating oil down in that cylinder and we're able just to pop that off just like that. So from going back and forth, putting a little bit of pressure in different areas, we're able to pull that cylinder off there. This is a genuine Yamaha cylinder. You can see it's engraved Yamaha there. We've got the CC there. We've got the first 3 digits of the part number. 22K is going to be the first 3 digits. Now, we can actually take and probably hone this cylinder. It's got some pretty rough spots. We may need to bore it out, but it is going to need a little bit of work there before we go back together, which we're not going to do. So this cam chain now, what you don't want to do is take and spin this motor over really quick. This cam chain will bind in there and you'll have some serious problems. The other thing you don't want to do is stick your finger down here and pull this cam chain over. It'll chop your finger right off. So I've seen that done before. Not a pleasant experience. It's never actually happened to me. I've got all 10 digits and hope that it continues to be that way. Grab a pick now, and if your finger's down in there, grab it with a pick. If it's not down in there, you got all 10 digits, grab the circlip here off of the piston. Just come in from the side there. You'll see a little groove that you stick your pick or your small screwdriver there and pry that little circlip out of there. Tap on this pick here to get it in behind that clip. Pry that clip out of there. So I'm going to set that clip aside. If we're reusing this piston, you'd want to make sure you keep close an eye on that clip. But like I said, we're not going to reuse that piston. So now you can take anything, take and push that piston pin out of there. What you don't want to do is take a hammer and just start beating on this thing, because you could potentially damage that crank. Okay, what you can do again is grab your reverse pliers then. Probably more than likely we're not going to reuse this piston. We're for sure not. I've told you that like 8 times. but more than likely you're not going to use this piston. If it's hard to pull out of there, you need to replace that piston. Obviously those rings, you need to do some work to the cylinder there. So if this piston slides in and out fairly easily, it's not loose, that rod isn't shot, you can reuse that piston pin. If you're doing a top end rebuild, replace the stinking piston pin. It's like $8 from Yamaha, for crying out loud. No reason to save $8 to try to reuse that pin. It is very, very important. All right, and then once you get it out far enough, a lot of times you can grab with your fingers, pull on it. You want to inspect that piston really good if you're reusing it. Again, I bet you can guess what I'm going to say if we're not reusing it. And we're going to throw that away. So we have got our crankshaft now that, again, you want to make sure you don't let this cam chain drop down in there so that you don't break your engine case. And I'll show you the potential break point there that you got to look out for when we get down to that area there. So we've got our starter up top here. Guess we could remove that at this time. I had somebody from another country comment that like Yamaha calls their four-wheelers like Big Bear and Kodiak because if it was like some other country's names, like these four-wheelers weren't designed in the US, but we still call them like US names like Kodiak. I don't know, comment below your guys' thoughts on that, because he was saying that they sell way better because they have American names. They're not like Kentong, you know, or like Jintong, because those wouldn't sell very well here. But a Kodiak, it sells really well, or a Grizzly, or heck, a Badger. They sold very well in the 1980s. If you're around during that time frame, give us a thumbs up, because curious to know age range of who watches these videos on a Badger, because most of the time it's like kids riding these things, or it's like grandparents buying these four-wheelers for kids. So you may be born like in 2010, or you might be born in like 1942. So comment below what year you were born, because I'm curious who is watching this video. So we've got our starter here. We've got our starter pulled off of these two spots here, two posts here. What I don't want you to do is take a hammer and just start beating on this thing, because the starter is probably in good shape. To get this out, you can use a rubber or plastic mallet here to tap on it. It doesn't give you a really good spot to tap on it. So I would suggest, if it's not coming out like right away, to just kind of hold your horses on it, because when we pull this cover off of here, we'll actually pull that starter off as well. I do see here that it's kind of working itself out at this point, so don't stress out about it if you can't get it off. You probably just need to be more patient. So this is a genuine starter here. It actually feels really good. No catching, no weird noises. It's a 55X number, so I'm assuming that's stock. It's got a Yamaha emblem on there, so I'm gonna go ahead and inspect that, make sure that's in good condition. Now the funnest part is these clutch cover bolts here. Huge pain in the neck. I'm gonna get to those shortly. For now, I'm gonna go over here to this side, which is also another huge pain in the neck. Same exact things over here, except for less of them. So I also need the block of wood that my camera is sitting on, so I'm gonna have to do something different here. 1 second.